Welcome to Sophia Rising, a space with no walls. I'm Michaela Aphrodite, and this is Athena Alea. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about something really important that's happening right now, and that is spiritual warfare. It is literally a spiritual war that's happening right now. For a long time, so many different prophets and a lot of different, people like Nostradamus and Edgar Casey, they spoke of this World War III, and World War III is really not a war where we're blowing up things. World War III is a spiritual war that's happening right now. And so what we need to do is we're coming together as with love and wisdom to help you guys kind of work on overcoming this, because this is a war that has to be overcame. And we have to come together as a collective, um, through love and wisdom to overcome this. So we're going to talk about all the stuff that I'm seeing, and we're going to talk about the stuff that has happened in history, how we're just repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And we're going to talk about what's the resolution. So let's get started and really dive into this. So I know you've got a lot to say. I have a lot to say. This is going to be this is going to be crazy. Um, I'm seeing so much chaos right now. I've literally tried joining multiple Facebook groups to try to figure out if I can find a space that we can actually talk about certain things that can help the world. And every single one I join, whether it's Life After Death or Galactic Federation of Light Workers or some other thing about light workers or healing the world or anything that even remotely sounds like it's tapering into the metaphysical community, all I'm seeing is fighting. And what I'm personally seeing is there's three groups that are rising up right now that are almost like warring up against each other. And that is what I would call the knowledge seekers, the Christians, and then the light workers. And it seems like the light workers are really trying to basically bring everybody together, and then you've got the knowledge seekers that are really getting out there. They're discovering ancient wisdom. They're learning things that they never knew before, all this secret stuff that's been hidden from us for a long time, how we've been lied to. And they're really trying to get that message out. But instead of doing it, to help people, they're criticizing people, and they're slamming it in their face, and it's causing people to rebel back. And then the Christians, of course, they want to hold on to their personal truth that they've known for a long time. And one of the things that's really difficult about all that is that it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince them they've been fooled. And that's where the problem is that, and they're fighting for their belief. It's like, if you take my belief away from me, what do I have? And it's painful. You've believed this way for a long time, and all of a sudden somebody's like trying to rip it away from you. Light workers are trying to say, hey, we can all find peace together, and we can all do this together, and nobody has to lose anything. But it's challenging. And I know you're seeing it, and there's so much division that's happening right now. Okay, so I know you had a lot to say about all this. I kind of went on a rampage about some of the things that I know is happening, and we have a lot more to share. So, what it, I mean, like, how would you like to open up with? Like, what do you want to say?
First, I feel like what I'd like to do is maybe expand the scope of the conversation a little bit, just for perspective's sake.
Mhm.
Um, you know, each of us, I feel like in our own way, um, are privy to conflict, all around us. Even if we live in a very small microcosm, if for example, we choose not to listen to the news or things like that, we just kind of keep to ourselves. It's likely we experience conflict at work, within our own social groups, or even just within ourselves, right? But as we grow the scope of that more and more, then we also witness it in these different social groups, on social media, which is prolific right now, especially in terms of how we communicate and socialize with each other. Of course, we see it in the news. For those of us here, that live in America right now, we're going through an election cycle, for president, and that's always a highly, what I would say, tumultuous time. Politics has always leveraged propaganda extensively, and as my own 17-year-old son said yesterday, it doesn't even seem like it's about choosing, a candidate anymore that you feel is going to do, the best job. It's about choosing the candidate that you hate the least. It's just it's a mud fest, right? And it's very disconcerting, and it puts a lot of fear into people. The news always has fear, fear-based stuff. The you know advertising industry, it's essentially, in my personal opinion, an industry built on how to manipulate human consciousness,
I
right?
agree with
All of the, and I can say for a fact, that, somebody who has a degree in psychology, when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I learned about industrial psychology, which is a field of psychology that studies how, the human mind gets triggered by certain things. And this gets heavily
Uh-oh.
leveraged by the advertising industry, politics, etc. Right? It's how to manipulate the human mind. Then we think about, the world, and there's all kinds of conflicts going on, and here in the West, of course, Christendom is the predominant religion. You still hear people say we're a Christian nation. If you look at the statistics, that's not necessarily true. There's many religions represented in America. Um, but, we tend to look into the scope of what we know. If we consider, spiritual conflict, if the topic is spiritual conflict, and we look around the world, we can see there's a number of spiritual conflicts spanning a variety of different, religions throughout the world, including Islam, Christianity, Buddhism. There's wars going on in Yemen, right now, Syria, Nigeria, Sudan, Myanmar. Uh, there's tons of religious wars going on, and not only do these wars have to do with particular religious groups trying to assert their dominance with respect, to their own dogmatic beliefs, but also in terms of resources, and we have ideals like ethnic cleansing and stuff that come in. If we look furthermore at the facts, right, one thing that we can see historically speaking is what's going on in the world is not necessarily unique. There has been religious conflict, uh, you know, uh, dominant, personalities in politics and stuff going on for as long as we know of human history, right? Politics, division, asserting your own perspective over others, um, has been a part of the human collective consciousness
For a
what,
while.
for a
Yeah.
long time, right? So they say history repeats itself.
Mhm.
Definitely, right? It's obvious humans aren't learning, from that. It's just we just keep moving from one, certain dominant cultures to other dominant cultures. What's changed though now is that it is it being this information, this knowledge and understanding of conflicts is on our radar, or it can be in a way that it never has been before.
Yeah.
With the advent of the internet and social media, the dissemination of information is so fast, right? And then on top of that, people can say anything they want. So, there's a lot of misinformation going on. And
That's
then
true.
what happens, that just, it's so easy to create more and more and more conflict with people not even knowing, you know, really what's going on, and just believing what sounds right to them, or what makes sense. And there's been a decline in many of the educational systems throughout the world as well. So people aren't learning, analytical thinking, as robustly as they were, in previous decades. So while the spiritual conflicts that exist in the world are not necessarily unique, the way that we're handling it is, because of the difference in the scope that we can perceive, and the way information gets disseminated, and that's creating, I think, more conflict and anxiety in our own personal microcosms.
Yeah.
Because unless you control what you see, and understand to take things with a grain of salt, or to go do your own research, right? You just can get bombarded with information.
Hmm.
People end up in fits. People are having anxiety attacks and everything like that, just over the election here in
No,
America.
I know. I know. And and what's interesting, we're getting a squeal here. Um, what's interesting here is that I think you made some really valid points here. Is that people, we've had wars. I mean, like physical wars, like bombing wars, over religion in the past. I mean, there's the Revolutionary War. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. Catholicism, over Protestants. They went after each other for a while. I mean, they were like burning churches and stuff like that in the past. But eventually, what we went through a phase where people were just sort of like to themselves and quiet, but we didn't have internet. So they would have a religious group and they would go gather together. And a lot of that conflict during that time wasn't quite so strong. But it was when the internet really became, social media became like really a big deal. And there's no monitoring what you say. Anybody can say anything. And so all this stuff starts coming out. What really, really kind of pushed things ahead was when a lot of ancient knowledge started coming up to the forefront. And these people that I would call like knowledge seekers, these are people that are collecting information or studying from professors and all this. I mean, people that have literally go in and they spend a whole life's mission going back to the original text, the original writing, and they are people that are, academic, they spend years and years and years of life studying how to read Sanskrit, how to read Hebrew, how to read, you know, Greek, and they spend a lot of time learning the history and going through and getting some of these materials that nobody else can get. Okay. And really understanding it and really diving into the culture and understanding it. And then now they're like making it public. And these people used to like study on their own and they'd only like talk to their own other professors, right? And they'd commune together, but that was it. And now they're all over the internet. So now the average Joe is learning stuff that they didn't know before. So then you've got people who've believed things for a very long time and they're being told that what they believed was wrong. I mean, do you know that it wasn't until recently that people started realizing that the Bible was not written during the days that Jesus walked the earth. It was hundreds of years later that it was actually written down. And it was carried from word to mouth for many years until somebody decided they were going to start writing this stuff. So now people are saying, how can you believe that? How do you know? It wasn't Jesus who wrote it, you know? And so you've got a lot of people like fighting that war and and what it's doing is it's I've seen people who said that they used to be Christian and they're what they called Reformed Christians because they pull away from the core belief because they realize that this stuff isn't accurate. And that's a problem because you're losing people to to their core belief structure. and then you've got people that are coming in and attacking people, and they're making those people that won't let go of it turn into very violent, angry, horrific people, saying you're going to go to hell. You're going to you're this, all these bad things are going to happen to you, and they're like causing, this threatening stuff that's happening, and I see it everywhere. And I think that there's just a really, really strong missing piece where people are even afraid to say the word God, and they're turning it into some sort of like fantasy, like, oh, your imaginary sky god. And there's a lot of it's just so much anger out there. And I think what is important that we do is we kind of talk about how do we resolve this. I mean, like, what's the answer? Because honestly, I feel like that I can have a conversation with anybody about any religion and really listen without judging them. So why is it that everybody's getting so angry? Why does everybody have to fight over who's right and wrong? You know?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of it's such a big conversation. There's
Mhm.
a lot of answers, I think, to that question that go into the big answer, right? But one thing I want to say up front before we delve into that is we should ask ourselves why it's important for us collectively to solve this problem of divisiveness that's happening globally in various areas like politics, which is starting to seemingly for many of us come to the forefront, especially with respect to religion and spiritual traditions. um, why do we need to solve this, right? Like, can people just sit there and hate on each other and, well, that's what they do over there and this is what we do over there? No, we cannot do that. Why? Because at some point, with the way things are ramping up, because of the manner by which information can get disseminated so quickly, and the way that the collective consciousness can get manipulated so easily through the media, there's going to be a breaking point, right? And we're talking about our human survival.
Mhm.
We are at a time in history where we have the greatest population of humans on the planet. We have the most densely populated cities that have ever existed. There have been numerous scientific studies and psychological studies that show the impact that even just being in densely populated areas have, and how quickly things can spread into violence. When we consider things like events that lead to riots, like I remember the Rodney King incident back in, I don't remember if it was the 80s or 90s, right? I was just a young kid, but it spread like wildfire. This video gets released of a man, a African American man getting beat by the cops, and it just erupted. The internet was even barely a thing at that point, right? But just being on the news like that, the nation just erupted, and there were just there were violent riots everywhere. People collectively do not feel as if they can trust their governments. They did not feel protected during the financial crises back in 2008. We had the pandemic that threw things into more question for people. People are feeling destabilized,
Right.
and they're looking towards religion and spirituality to answer their questions, and then finding more and more divisiveness, right? So this all just goes to show that, like, if the trend doesn't stop, at some point we are going to erupt. The frustration collectively is going to reach a peak, and
Mhm.
we're going to erupt. And what will that result in? Well, who knows? But I do know one thing: we got a lot of nuclear weapons around the globe, right? We can annihilate ourselves like this if
Mhm.
we wanted to, right? Someone just gets their little hand on a button, bam, it's like that.
Mhm.
And that would be the quickest, probably easiest way. There's so many ways we could annihilate ourselves. And personally, I believe that if we continue on this path, we will be the first species to exist on the planet that has annihilated itself.
Mhm.
So this topic is important because it has to do with our survival fundamentally, right? We can't
Mhm.
continue to act like this as a species and think that we're going to continue to thrive and survive, in the future. So it begs for us to answer this question and to ask ourselves, you know, why is this so important for us to fight like this, right? Let's be honest, it's immature, okay? It's immature, it's ego driven based. Um, for a person to have to try to conquer another individual with their ideas of what's right, I'm right, you're wrong. Okay, why don't you can live just fine, having different beliefs and still work together, for our own survival and thriving as a species. Not everybody has to believe what you believe, right? So that's my question. I'd like to get your input. Why do you think people are so driven to have to prove themselves and their pigeonhole perspective as right over everyone else's? Why do humans not feel more inclined to just respect each other's beliefs and to live in some kind of harmony? Like what do you think the reason for that is?
I think that there's a lot of trauma that's happened. I mean, you literally haven't you really can't meet anybody these days that hasn't experienced trauma. And that trauma has to surface in some way. And what it does is it tends to make a person feel like their self-worth is being diminished when somebody tells them they're wrong. So they can't just acknowledge that potentially they could learn something. Because if you're telling somebody that they are wrong, then you're telling them that they're stupid, and and that their value as a person is now being diminished. And that's where people start fighting because they feel like they're being attacked. And they are. Let's be real. People are attacking people. And people are attacking because then I have to be right. Because if I'm not right, then I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I have to admit to myself that I'm not worth anything. And that's where the problem stems from, is that we as a society have been so injured and so harmed and so traumatized because of all the pain that we've gone through as children and young adults, that suddenly that trauma comes surfacing and shows up attacking other people. And there's a saying I say a lot to people, is that hurt people hurt people. And so what you're seeing here is a bunch of hurt people that are hurting other people because they've got to prove something to themselves, you know. And and it's interesting, kind of talking about the Christians for a second. My mother is a hardcore Christian, and I'm always kind of trying to bring some new light to the picture, result, and we'll have a conversation. And I love having conversations with my mom. She's a really cool person. And but I was telling her how I'd been studying Hebrew and how I'm discovering a lot of things, and it's so interesting. And she said to me, "I'm not sure if I could do that, not at my age." And I said, "Why's that?" And she said, "Because if I discovered something that I had been taught all my life wasn't true, I think it would devastate me." She goes, "Because I would lose my identity and who I am, and I wouldn't know what to do with it then." And I think that's where the problem is that people are losing face. You know, if I'm not a Christian, then who am I? Well, you can't be a Christian and still have additional knowledge. You can still be a Christian and be a light worker. You can still be a Christian and be a knowledge seeker. You can be, there was a term that was going around for a little while where people were studying the Jewish religion and they were saying, "I'm a Christian Jew." I mean, I remember one time sitting in a Buddhist temple listening to one of the monks talking, and he was talking about a woman that said she was a Christian, but she wanted to be initiated as a Buddhist. And he said, "How can you do that?" And she goes, "I'll be the wisest Christian ever." Or the Zenist Christian. She goes, "I'll be the Zenist Christian ever." And this is the kind of stuff that needs to people need to understand that they need to unite all this and they need to get past their trauma. And people are not healing this. They need to be doing their shadow work. They need to be working on that soul alchemy within themselves. Otherwise, this is going to keep on happening. You
Yeah,
know?
you brought up a number of things, which I see like the picture of formulating now. I think I've asked myself a lot in the past few months, especially, what is this epidemic of low self-esteem and self-loathing? And, it's like, I feel like, I'll just have a regular conversation with someone. And in that conversation, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's like people feel sorry just for even existing, right? I mean, it's that bad. Or my new favorite thing that I'm on now is the gentle reminder, right? You to do something and you didn't do it, so somebody comes and gives you just a gentle reminder. Why? Because if you give them a real reminder, that person is going to feel like, oh, they're a piece of shit now. Pardon my French. But how's it gotten to this point? I think now I'm starting to understand this. We are in a unique era of human history in which people are, not everyone, there's nations out there where this is really not a thing. We're very, very blessed in the West. But, the ability for many people to live a life of their own choosing is something that's very unique, historically speaking. For most of human history, what humans experienced were, essentially a conquering mentality and everyone in their place, depending upon where they lived and what the king or the emperor or, the fiefdom or whatever the structure was that they lived in. And this is what was being impressed upon the consciousness of people always was, this is the structure. This is where you fit in. Do not divert from that. And when you have ideas, like conquering mentality, competition, rank, etc., somebody's always on top and other people are on the bottom, right? You can't be a conqueror unless there's conquered. You can't be on the top unless there's people on the bottom. You can't compete to win unless somebody loses, right? So if you are not in the top category, then what are you? You're a loser. You're less. You're below. You're in your place, right? It's been a slavery mentality that has been impressed upon humans collectively for thousands and thousands of years. Now we're living in a period of time where more and more people have the ability to live a life, of their own choosing. And we're still struggling to kind of catch up with a lot of like our social structures and stuff to really make that happen. But I think people haven't been able to heal
Mhm.
from that degradation that has occurred historically speaking to the human consciousness. So I think we have to call that out and we have to address that. And we have to know that it's our individual responsibility to heal ourselves. And once we have healed ourselves, to support others in healing themselves as well. Only through that understanding that we do not need to be slaves or think of ourselves as less or be constantly worried about apologizing for our own existence, but allow ourselves to be free. Can we really move forward? Because if you don't believe that you're free and you're trying to assert yourself because you're traumatized, essentially, then what are you doing? You're behaving like your abuser.
Yeah.
Right.
Hurt people hurt people.
That's right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
now we're together full circle.
Yeah, the victimizer becomes the victimizer. I mean, sorry, the victim becomes the victimizer. And that's exactly right. Um, you know, one of the things that I will always do, because I was raised Christian, and I want the Christian religion to heal, because it's really going through a lot of pain right now, but I'm always gonna like throw some scripture out there that I like. But anyway, so in Revelations, okay, it talks about Revelations 2, it talks about the seven churches. And it's like, and this is what I like about you, but this is what I have against you. And it goes through every single one of them. And I want you guys to all like really think about this, because what this passage is saying is that nobody is right and nobody is wrong. It's basically, here's the good thing about you, but here's the thing you need to work on. Here's the good thing about you. Here's the thing you need to work on. Now, if you take all of these things, right, and you take all the good things and you put them all together, then that would be the perfect church, right? And what that actually comes down to is love and wisdom. What is happening is people are putting out wisdom because they've discovered it, okay, but they're not putting out love. And then some people are just trying to shed love, like, and they're doing it sarcastically. So I see it in the Facebook groups, and it's really kind of funny. It's like, be blessed, or in love and light, see you later. It's like they'll say something kind of like sarcastic.
Right.
What?
That's what I love and right. Bye.
Yeah. You know, they'll say something sort of like, "I'm better than you, bye," and it's the sarcasm that really kind of pisses people off, because what they're doing is they're making it seem like, "Hey, I am better." I mean, they're really saying, "I'm better than you. I'm not going to have this conversation anymore." And and that's what's really sad, because the conversation needs to happen. And what needs to happen is that we need to take all religions and see the good in them, and and see, is there something that you can take from it? Is there something you can learn from it? Nobody's telling you have to stop being a Christian, and nobody's telling you that you have to stop seeking out your knowledge. Nobody's telling you that you're wrong, but everybody seems to be missing. It's like I go so far over here that I lose track of the beauty in something that's amazing. I'll never lose track of the beauty in Christianity, but I also see the pain that the Christian religion is suffering from right now. And it's because there's this birth that's trying to happen, and they will not recognize it, and they're trying to keep it from being born.
Well,
And
I have a little scripture for you.
okay, speak it, Athena, Alea.
um, I myself was raised Christian. Um, Half my family's Protestant, half my family's Catholic, and I study mysticism, of which I believe Christianity, or the life of Christ, I should say, exemplifies.
Mhm.
You know, the true internal state that the mystic is seeking to achieve.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite verses of the Bible that I feel like really keeps me in check is from Matthew 7, 22 to 23. And it essentially says, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? Have we not cast out demons and devils in your name? Have we not performed all of these wonderful works? And then I will profess unto you, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. Essentially what Christ was saying, he was essentially calling these kind of people out, like Pharisees. He's saying, you do all these things in my name, but yet you do not have me in your heart, right? You do not have me in your heart, and therefore I do not know you. Christ was very specific about what he is looking for in people and what he was trying to inspire. And
Mhm.
that is a change of heart.
Yeah.
It's not, you can do things all day, but
Mhm.
those are physical things that are meaningless if in your heart you have not changed.
I 100% agree. And and when he was talking about, and here's a huge misconception that I didn't know until not too long ago. It just takes this deeper dive into the studies to be able to understand this. Originally, it was not meant for the public. It was literally meant for the priests, and the priests have spent years and years decoding. I mean, they knew the codes, right? And so their job was to take this beautiful thing and teach something from it.
The New Testament was written in Koine Greek. Koine Greek was the common tongue, was the tongue of the common people at that time. And I think it's important to understand that because, um, when Christianity was first birthed as a religion, right? It was like a rebel group, right? They had to hide out,
Mhm.
people's houses and basements and practice in secret. Otherwise, they could get dragged off, to the Colosseum and, thrown in the gladiatorial stadium or whipped in the streets and flayed to death, right? Christianity was not allowed when it first, started coming to birth. They got together in groups, and they talked about things. And then later, when the Greek Orthodox Church was formulated and a priesthood, et cetera, was set up, many of those ideas still remain, in the church to this day. Like, for example, when you go to the sacrament of reconciliation, the priest, you're not confessing your sins to the priest who then absolves you of your sins like in the Catholic Church. The priest is just essentially there to be a sounding board while you confess, to Christ so you can be reconciled, right? It was meant, in my opinion, not to be, that Christ's message wasn't meant to be separated from the common person. And I think that's why we saw the Protestant Reformation much later on in history was, you know, as structures begin to get set up, right? Where there's people at the top echelon and people below, then the dissemination of information does not become free flowing anymore. And I think
Mhm.
people who wanted to begin the Protestant Reformation wanted to take that back. They wanted to say, no,
Mhm.
we don't want a priest to tell us what it is. We want to
Right.
tell God what it is, right?
Well, let me step in. I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding about what I was saying. Okay. And I totally respect what you're saying and I get it. And agree. But back in those days, people were extremely religious and they spent years studying things. I mean, like really, really studying it. And so, like even like the disciples, they knew they would study all this, like the Kabbalah and all those things, at a very deep level. I mean, they were very religious people. So a lot of the stuff was understood, and for them, it wasn't code. Okay, but for us, especially in the translation, it's like code for us because, and let me give you my example that I was going to tell you. Okay, so for instance, when Jesus was talking about being born again, he said that you they were asking like, hey, how can I re-enter into my mother's womb? And he said, no, you have to be born of spirit, and to be born of spirit, if you think about it, okay, and you look at the tree of life, right? You just look at that, for example. You've got at the very bottom, you've got Malkut, and then you start moving into Yesod, and then you've got Hod and Nesak, and then you've got Tibrith. So each one of those represents the different elements that you move through. First, you're getting grounded, then you're clearing your mind, then you're alchemizing the emotions that are within you, then you're igniting your passion and getting rid of your angers, and then once you're completely like gone through all of these transmutations, at that point then you become born of spirit, which is Tippereth. And so this is just me kind of looking at some of these things that I've learned and realizing that this is an elevation of consciousness. Whether you do it through the Golden Dawn or you do it through the Buddhism or whatever, you're still taking a path of purification that has to happen, and you're moving up the tree as you purify your own level, your consciousness. However, right? And that purification you have to be born of spirit, which means that all of this has to be alchemized. And so people think, at least they've been taught, and this is where they take it like so literal, and then they take it and twist it and turn it into something simple that's not simple. And they say, oh, I just have to say, Lord Jesus, come into my heart. And now I'm saved because Jesus died on the cross for me. And that was the atonement for my sins. Therefore, I can go and do whatever I want because I'm going to get a free ticket to heaven. So, because I was born into sin, and they take these things and they turn it into something it's not. The message was that this transmutation needs to happen, where they have to go through, like shadow work, healing all the pain and the suffering that you've gone through, and then be reborn into spirit. And the only way you can do that is after you've like cleansed it all. And that's not one little simple prayer. If you are truly born of spirit, you're not going to be running around sinning. That's the whole thing. That's the thing that I just don't get is, and this is where I'm talking about it, like, when I said it's written in code, maybe that was probably a misstep in the way I said it. It's just that they're not understanding the message. Huh?
I would maybe just, my opinion would be to call it a formula. I would
Yeah.
say that, there is a formula that exists in the New Testament, and we have to take into context too, that um, uh, you know, Christ came from a Jewish community. He was Jewish,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? And back in those times, with respect to the Greek culture, right? And the reason I keep bringing up the Greeks is because the New Testament was written in Greek, right? It was a
Oh,
written,
yeah.
and in the culture of that time, the culture of that era, the ancient Greek people, they they were lovers of wisdom. Truly, they wanted to preserve wisdom of all kinds. This is why they had syncretic spiritual practices. This is why they studied the Kabbalah and the Egyptian mysteries, and Indian mysteries. Pythagoras himself in his own cult had Brahmins from India. They People came from all over the world, came to ancient Greece, and they preserved the world knowledge and wisdom in their language, and their writings, and their symbolism, and their spiritual practices, right? And you can see that in the New Testament as well. Christ spoke in parables because he, in my opinion, he understood that, everybody's consciousness is at a different level, right? The New Testament was written in the common tongue of the time, but you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. How do you get that? By going through the purification processes.
Mhm.
What are those? They're very clearly defined by not only by Christ's teachings, but by the way that he lived his life. He demonstrated the path essentially of the initiate, and
Mhm.
how to overcome, not only your own personal, indiscretions essentially, but the laws of the physical realm. He trampled death by death.
Mhm.
And people will say, well, he only did that because he was Christ. He was pretty much straight up saying, you can do this. And apostles are performing miracles in his name. People are like, oh, we can't do that anymore. Why? People think that there's just an end, like, oh, just ended, the apostle era ended, and now no more miracles.
Mhm.
There's miracles happening all over the world.
Miracles happen now. People just won't recognize it, and they won't see it as what it is. And I mean, I personally have seen miracles over and over and over and over again, things that you can't question. Okay. And but kind of bringing this full circle, you see where the problem is that there's people that have become preachers that are cherry picking, and they're drilling home certain things that is harming people. So when you tell somebody that they have permission to go out and sin because they're forgiven, this creates a chaotic world.
Do people really teach that?
Yes.
That blows my mind.
No, I'm serious. That what they believe is because they were born into sin that they cannot change. Okay.
I,
So
I,
that means that's like convincing a person that you are a criminal and you will never, ever be free of acting like a criminal. Like, so it's like a hypnotic thing that people are doing to these people and teaching them you're born into sin, you're a sinner, and you have to be saved, you have to repent your sins, and once you do that, Jesus absolutely wipes it all, and for the rest of your life from this point on, it doesn't matter what you do, you got a free ticket to heaven.
See, my grandparents were Christian Reformed, and they have
Mhm.
similar belief structure, which is you're born into sin, i.e., you are a sinner, and you have to ask Christ into your heart, and then
Mhm.
you're forgiven of your sins. But the way that it was taught to me by them in the church that we went to when I was young is, you know, Christ is the reconciler, and yes, you might sin again, but if you have Christ in your heart, you're trying to actively live a good life. You're
Right.
not like, oh, this is my free ticket to heaven. I could go sin, and well, I said Jesus is in my heart, so that's it. No, that's in their opinion, that would have been fake. Like, you don't actually believe Jesus is in your heart because you're not acting like it, right? If you're
No.
a person of
Right.
faith, then you're actively striving out of your love for Christ to be a better person. But I do recall also hearing as I was growing up, especially in the Catholic Church, because in the Catholic Church, you can go and confess your sins and then
Mhm.
get absolved. That was where I started hearing, about people being like, oh, well, you just uh, if you do something, you just go get absolved, right? And then people using it as an excuse to go do
Mhm.
whatever it is they want. That's not what the teaching is, though.
Right.
In my understanding, that's just how some people in their fallen state decided they wanted to manipulate the system. To hear, though, that some people actually would teach that is a shock for me. But I haven't been to
Mhm.
every church in the world. I don't.
It's becoming a thing. Um, there's a difference between I'm trying to look at the words. What was it that I used? What was the word I used from him dying on the cross? He was it azobs? It was what was the word I used? Not there's forgiveness, and then there's um,
Absolution.
uh, not that's not the word. When a person like takes punishment for the crime, what is that called? When there's got to be a punishment for the crime. Um, ugh, I'm gonna what do you call it? Scratch this out while I'm trying to figure this out. Hold on a second.
Can you pause it a sec while you're doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back.
So what I'm saying is that there's a difference between atonement and forgiveness. So forgiveness is when you do something that hurt me very badly. Maybe you didn't mean to, but it did hurt. And you tell me, and I say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And when I say that, I don't intend to do it again. I intend to resolve that within myself because when I say forgiveness, that means you're going to forgive me for the act, knowing that I'm not going to do it again. It's not, you're not going to forgive me knowing I'm going to do it again, because that's not forgiveness. Okay. Forgiveness is letting something go, like, and, putting it aside because I believe you're not going to do it again. And, so atonement is where a sacrifice has to be made. So, for instance, Christ dying on the cross, that was an atonement. There was an atonement that needed to be made. So he took on that atonement for mankind's behavior, right? But that's like to resolve sin. I didn't mean that's like a one-time thing. So, like, the next time somebody does it, there was no more atonement. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, I'm resolving you, I'm giving you a clean slate. Okay. But what you do with it afterwards is on you. And that's where the problem comes in, is that people think, one, done, slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. I can go out now because of what Jesus said. Hey, thanks for dying on the cross, bro. You know, so now I get to go to heaven, and I can go cheat on my wife. I can do this. I can,
Do
you
they
know,
not read the rest of the Bible at all?
that's the problem. And see, that's where the problem comes in, is people are not reading. I don't think they're reading the Bible, actually, because Jesus he was kind to other people. Like, he would eat dinner with thieves and prostitutes and tax collectors, and he would wash their feet, and he would be kind to them, and he would loving. And when people would say, "Why are you associating with these people?" and they would get all critical and judgmental, he would tell them how wrong they were. And yet people are doing that right now in the name of God, judging other people, criticizing them, tell them they're going to go to hell, tell them they're fixing to be tormented. Anything that's beautiful. I saw this girl post something really beautiful about trauma and overcoming it, and recognizing that she was a light worker, and how all that trauma helped her, by, you know, raising her consciousness to be able to love at a deeper level. This guy comes in and posts in there afterwards, that it was all a bunch of bullshit, and all this stuff, love talk is evil. How is that possible? Like, how is God's love evil? And Christ said that the kingdom of heaven lives within you. So you're over here thinking you just bought a free ticket to heaven, and you actually, your ticket was supposed to be within yourself. He did the atonement so that you can, like, be free, and start working from there. Clean slate, work from there. So what is all this that people are doing? I have no idea. But what I am seeing is that all the people that are, what do you call it, knowledge seekers, that are learning that all this information that's coming out from all these people that have been studying, and finding these ancient scripts, and finding the original text of the Bible and translating it, and seeing, hey, I'm actually reading about the culture, and I understand that at a different level. And they're bringing this information out, and so these people are, like, slapping it in people's faces, and they are also the being angry as well. So you've got, this one's angry because you're too stupid to understand, and this whole basking hell thing isn't even real. And then you've got these people who haven't even read the whole Bible, and they're just misinterpreting everything that Christ even said, and they're forgetting about love thy neighbor as yourself, treat people as you want to be treated. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Oh, and what about the whole chapter of Corinthians, where it talks about what love actually is? They've missed, it's like, whoa, dude, you've lost it all. Like, you're gonna over here. I'm sorry, I've gotten a little bit on a
I
pedal
think
here.
no, I think what you're doing essentially is you're expressing the reality of what is out there. And the reason why we see all this diversity in perspective of the Bible, I mean, look how many, translations there are, right? Innumerable translations of the Bible, not to mention all the different languages it's been translated in, as well as the different versions, it's like playing the telephone game. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. A person is going to approach whatever it is they're looking at, they're reading, they're learning, from the baseline of where their consciousness is at that time.
That's exactly right.
So, you're talking about, as an example, people who have decided to take an academic perspective on Christianity. So what are they doing? They're saying, okay, look, I'm going to step away from the dogma, and I'm going to go look at it for myself. I'm going to bring up all the old documents. I'm going to learn the languages. I'm going to understand the culture of the people of the time. So I have context for what those words, really meant. A nice example of that is the word for forgiveness, which is sin. Hold on, I'm going to look it up really quick because sinhorisi, which actually means to open up your heart, right? Forgiveness is when you open up your heart and give space to someone in your heart, right? But we translate it totally different now. It's like, well, you asked me to forgive you, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say, okay, the slate is clean. No, it's about opening up giving space to somebody. It's a real reconciliation, right? But even when you're looking at things academically speaking, all religious texts that were transmitted from the Spirit can only truly be understood at their most fundamental level when somebody's in the state of consciousness to do that, right?
Right.
So, even an academic, will look at someone and say, well, you don't, when Jesus said this, what he really meant was this. And I know that because at the time of the Greeks, when it was written, this is what that phrase meant, they're still playing the same game.
Yeah, because it's a level of consciousness that they're in.
Right. Well, their level of consciousness then is essentially colored by the academic perspective.
Right.
It doesn't mean they opened up their heart anymore.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they necessarily actually learned anymore. They learned more intellectual stuff, but did it change their heart? Right. And that's why I'll go back to that verse, from Matthew. If the purpose of Christ's life was to teach people how to change their hearts.
Right.
And so if you want to, there's a saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. Right? You don't have to understand every single verse of the Bible. You don't have to understand the context of when it was written. You don't. If you can fundamentally just understand what Christ's singular message was, which was love, right? And then you can live. If you can live your life that way, you are probably, in my opinion, living your life more Christ-like than other people. But again, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about how do we reconcile these different ideas, right? I recognize that somebody who's preaching fire and brimstone dogma to me and telling me I'm going to live in hell, it doesn't offend me. It doesn't hurt me. I don't get upset, and I don't feel like I need to debate them all day long. Because
that's because you're at a higher level of consciousness.
I don't even know if I feel like I want to say that kind of stuff anymore. I just am in a different level of consciousness that doesn't require me to engage in divisiveness with other people. Right? I'll listen to them. And in fact, what I've really been trying to practice lately is the idea of learning from anyone and everything, even my own 17-year-old son. Even a person who is saying something hateful to me, I'll listen to it, and I'll go and I'll argue with it. And I may find that, in the end, maybe I did not agree at all. Or maybe I'll find maybe there was something in there that was a truth for me,
Right.
But but I what I don't do anymore is continue to feed that negativity. And if it seems as if that, because sometimes when you just refuse to feed into the negativity, that inflames the other side even more, right? That can make them even more. I found that can make people even more pissed off than debating with them, right? Because essentially the way they interpret that is, well, you don't even give a crap about it enough to even talk to me about it. So now I'm going to
Mhm.
keep badgering you.
Right.
And
No, you're absolutely right. You
I'll just make the graceful exit. But I think what we have to come to really understand is that in all these different viewpoints and opinions, differences of understanding, right? If we consider the fact we're all little individual microcosms of God, that means we're all little tiny pieces of the puzzle of the one,
yeah.
which means that inherently, while not everything that may come out of our mouths or that we think is the absolute truth, right? There may be a part of it that goes into the whole puzzle.
No, you're right.
If we stop personalizing it, maybe we can learn from each other. And if
Mhm.
you feel like I'm going to go to hell because I don't believe the same thing you believe, but you can still get something out of what I have to say, and I can still get something out of what you have to say. Well, then I can go back home and cook dinner with my family and go and say my prayers and do whatever. And you can go home and do the same thing. And maybe you still sit there and believe I'm going to hell, but we can do that. You can believe I'm going to hell peacefully. That's all I'm saying. Let me go to hell if that's where it's really going, you know.
That's really funny. I think that you've really kind of came up with the solution here. And I love what you said. And that is we need to learn to listen to each other. We don't have to agree and we don't have to vocalize that we disagree. What we're doing here is saying, maybe I can listen to your truth and I can hear what you have to say and maybe I can walk away with something. Maybe there's something, one little microscopic thing that you can learn from that, you know? Or maybe it's about seeing that reflection of yourself that you can learn from. Like maybe you're seeing something in that person that's within you as well. But I think the overall thing is that the reason this is happening is because everybody needs to heal. And it's time for that to happen. We've gone through too much trauma. And the reason that we're fighting for right and wrong is our own ego. And we have to stop that. So we have to learn how to work through these things and be able to talk to people with love, acceptance, and 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 not just put everything in a little small box. There's things that I've learned from you that has to do with ancient Greece culture that I think is amazing. And just kind of like what you said, the Greeks used to study all these different things and they would put it all together. I think it's the little pieces from everything that makes the whole puzzle, like you said. It's when we take everything and put it together and understand that all of this used to be one and people took pieces that they liked and started something different and it just broke off. I mean, like you can tell from like a long time ago, religions would break off and break off because break off. Why? Because why did this happen? Why did religions break off? Because they believe that there need to be some kind of control in something or they wanted to push an angle and so it started another religion and it just kept on going. They didn't want to be under the Pope, so they created a religion that didn't serve the Pope. Then they wanted to push a certain agenda, so they did this. You know, they just keep on going and going and going. And these religions, as young as they are, it's they've lost a lot of that essence. I mean, before all of this, there was the old religion, which is full of magic and many different gods. And they got that all got banned because, oh, well, you can't do that because everybody's going to be competing. Well, my God said this, my God said that, and who's right or who's wrong. So we're going right back to there can only be one right or wrong. And this is the old way of doing things that they used to do in the 1800s. Why do we have to be the same non civilized mentality? We can actually, we're, shit, we're in the year 2024 now. I mean, we should be better than this. We should have learned by now. And we're getting closer and closer entering to the age of Aquarius. And this is the time where all this absolution needs to happen. All this healing needs to happen. We need to start being concerned about ourselves. If you're a Christian, you need to be walking the life of Christ. You need to be focusing on the things he taught, not what this person's going to hell. So I got to go and tell you, I'm going to stand up and tell you you're going to hell. That's not walking the life of Christ. Christ didn't do that. He didn't walk around I mean, when people would criticize somebody, he'd say, throw the first stone. If you think you're without sin. He did not act this way. And all the other religions that think they're right. I mean, we kind of focused on Christianity today, but we can actually probably focus on other religions another day. But there's other religions that are doing the same thing. The Muslims have been at war with anyone who is not a Muslim, and they'll fight and they'll do things to, it's like it's called the holy war for them. And it's just this has been going on for too long, and the only way out of it is love and acceptance and wisdom. We've got to expand our knowledge, and we've got to increase our love. You can expand your knowledge, but if without love you're nothing. You can be a prophet, you can be, a soothsayer, you can be a card reader, you can be a channeler, but without love you're nothing. It doesn't matter what kind of beautiful gifts you have. You can say, quote the Bible all day long and say you're a Christian and I've been saved and all that other stuff, but without love, you're nothing. So all the wisdom goes out the door if you don't have love. And all the love goes out the door if you don't have wisdom. So this is where we're coming together to kind of really bring this to the table, to let people understand that they need to start working on healing themselves. They need to focus within and stop worrying about what's going out. And maybe just take a moment just to, like you said, have a conversation with somebody and just listen. Maybe you can learn something.
Yeah, I feel ultimately, you know, as a collective, I think a lot of people in the world don't even understand what love truly is anymore. And I think it would be great to have a follow up podcast on that.
What is
Um,
love?
but, again, it's like, in my perspective, ideally, we could all just say, hey, you believe what you want to believe. I believe what I want to believe, and we'll just live in harmony together, right? That to me is ideal.
That would be ideal.
If that can't happen for some reason, I mean, I just say, can we just stop killing each other, torturing each other, and harming each other, over our beliefs? Like, I mean, that should just be fundamental, right? That should just baseline global humanity. Let's stop killing each other, harming each other, raping each other, flaying each other, saying all
Emotionally damaging each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's stop damaging each other, over religion, right? It's not religion isn't the problem. It's people is the problem. It's like
Yeah.
that's
People are the problem, right?
the gun that kills people. It's the people with the gun that kill the people, right? Um, that's all I can say. Maybe we need to take baby steps, but fundamentally, like, can we just stop killing each other, harming each other? And then from there, I feel like we could maybe move on collectively to more understanding. I mean, we all live in our own regions of the world. There are literally people out there who are being taught in their religion that it's okay to kill people of other religions, right? They are taught that. That's horrifying for, many of us in other regions of the world where that is not a thing, right? There's religions out there that teach us totally not just fine, but you should mutilate the genitals of young girls. You know, that is not in my personal construct, right? I think it's horrifying. Um, you know, but we can work within our own wherever we're at, right? Wherever you're at in the world, whether you're in China or Japan or the Middle East or whatever construct you're working in, just extracting that one fundamental message, you know, about learning to understand what love truly is, how to engage in love, how to use love to transform. Wouldn't you? I want to ask you at the bottom of your soul,
Mhm.
those who are listening, okay? Even if you have grown up with these um, constructs, beliefs, you know, where you are taught it's okay to harm others, you know, in the name of God, that it's right, that it's just, etc. Right? Deep inside, when you rather have something different, right? Deep inside, wouldn't you rather have someone just treat you nicely and kindly and respectfully, and vice versa, and you can both go home to your families and have a nice quiet evening, you know, deep inside, really, you know, I
Is
would
that
just
the way
I
you
would
want to be
just
treated?
charge every one of you to really explore deep
Mhm.
inside your heart what you would rather see for yourself, for your family, you know, for the world. Do you want violence? Do you want pain? Do you want like deep inside? Okay, explore that in your heart. That would be, you know, my one request for anyone who watches this podcast at some point, to really ask yourself, you know, regardless of what your belief structure is, you know, is it not, or would it not be better to live in a place where everyone can just kind of thrive and survive on their own fundamentally, but then also, hey, maybe uh, greet each other with a smile, with love, a helping hand, regardless of how someone else practices their life. And I'll end it at that.
I love it. I love it. I think that in the Bible it says to treat other people the way you want to be treated. And so you're asking people, how do you want to be treated? Right. And once you know how you want to be treated, like deep down in your heart, like you said, then that's the way we need to treat others, regardless of their personal religious beliefs. Regardless if you think that they're full of crap or they're living in fantasy world or they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe it's time just to listen and ask a person why. Why did you come to this decision? I've had conversations with people that I never understood. I remember like talking to Papa Doc one time, and I asked him how he came about choosing um, his belief structure. And when he told me how it was that saved his mom, that made all the sense in the world to me. And I was like, wow, this is such an interesting story. And
We should clarify that Papa Doc, the character she's speaking of, is a Hudon priest.
yeah, he's a Hudon priest, right? Yeah, he's been on the lot of these on our channel, so I kind of figured everybody would know. But anyway, yeah. So that's not a direction I would choose. Not for any other reason except for that. I don't know. I'm just really passionate uh, about the Kabbalah, Judaism, and Christianity, and that whole side of it. That's just me. That's what I like, and and I love sitting here listening to the stuff you talk about. Like when you get into the Greek culture, it's making me kind of like, ooh, I want to dive over there. It's so fascinating, and even his story is fascinating. But I talk to a lot of different people. I've talked to people that are like, I talked to a Tibetan priest. I've talked to I was trained by a Taoist abbot. You know, all of those things, I got something out of it. I walked away with something that completely changed my life. And if I would have rejected him, I wouldn't be in the place I am right now. And we can learn from all these things. We don't have to walk. I didn't become a Taoist. Um, Actually, I thought about it. I kind of walked the path for a little while, but it wasn't the direction I ended up in. Nobody's telling you have to change your religion. What we're asking for you to do is actually exercise some kindness, listen, and try to understand. Exercise love and wisdom, and release all that hate, the anger, the ego, that I have to be right, and really ask yourself, why is it? Why is it that you feel you have to be right? I think it's an important question you need to ask yourself. So, what I'd like to do now is, kind of leave it at that note. Deep, deep, deep down inside, how do you want to be treated? And ask yourself, why do you have to be right? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. We are going to be coming back again and talking about many different subjects so that we can help heal the world together with love and wisdom. We unite, we rise together. And this is called a space of no walls because we're not putting walls up. We're opening this up for everyone to be able to elevate their consciousness. With love and wisdom, we say goodnight.